Well, there you go, Charles. Our first Western, I think, isn't it?
Might not be, but it's okay.
Oh, well, no, you're right. We had the Dirty Dozen.
Right.
All right, well.
Whatever.
I do have some good news. I've got good news and bad news.
All right.
The good news is you don't have to wear the headphones today, Charles.
That's good.
The bad news is, unfortunately, Dr. Gorka has had to reschedule.
Yeah, well, this happened at the last minute. He's a good soul, and I hope most likely means that he's heavily focused on being a key part of the team to bring justice to these ne'er-do-well miscreant criminals who've been conspiring for these many years to use the apparatus of the deep state against the interests of the American public and the wider public at large. So Dr. Gorka does have a very busy schedule, and he sincerely apologizes for not showing up and letting us know minutes before the broadcast. But that's all right. We've got this set up to deal with these types of contingencies, and we can nonetheless talk about his work and what's going on. And there's a lot of news here, so beyond what we were going to talk about with Sebastian Gorka. So that just gives us the chance to expand our lively discussion.
Absolutely. And, people were very disappointed to not see you on Sunday, Charles. You've become a staple for so many.
And we're going to disappoint him again, I think, this coming Sunday. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, I don't mean to disappoint, but we're going to forego Sunday with Charles this Sunday, unfortunately. But the real important date, if I'm not mistaken, is tomorrow, because, of course, you've spoken for a great deal of time how November the 15th is a hard and fast deadline for the Clintons. Remind everybody, because many people seem to say, they're like, yeah, November 15th. What's up with November 15th?
All right. So the way this works is that most people don't have experience with operating a charity. And even I, who have been on the boards of charities since the mid-90s, even I didn't ever bother myself to try to fill out the forms of a charity. But when you read the body of law and speak to lawyers who understand the body of law that regulates charities, and you discover that trustees, in fact, are responsible for the charity, not the executives, and then you realize that if you fill out an annual return with the IRS that is not complete, you have not filled out that return, and that means that you're the charity is exposed to potential massive financial and criminal and other penalties. You begin to take this world a lot more seriously. So with your personal returns, those are due April 15th, you can get extensions. And similarly with a charity, the charity's return, it's not technically a tax return, it's an informational return, because most charities don't have to pay taxes other than on their unrelated business income. Those returns are due May 15th if your year end is December 31st, and you get an automatic extension if you ask for it now until November 15th, but you cannot file beyond that date. And so unlike an individual return, when you file a return for the Clinton Foundation, this will concern year 2017, but they ask a lot of pesky questions about what may have happened after December 31st. Yeah, speaking of pesky. What may have happened after December 31st, 2017. So if there have been, litigation, if there have been payments to the Clintons that shouldn't have occurred, or payments for political things that shouldn't have occurred, or there's fraud in the financial statements that happened after.
All of the above.
Oh yeah, all of the above. You're supposed to disclose all this in this return, and it's different states actually regulate the final deadline for filing the return with the state. But in New York State, you are not allowed to fill in a return after November 15th, 2017. So if you don't fill the return in, then you definitely are not operating lawfully, which means you're definitely not a charity, which means if the IRS wants to go after you, they put you out of the business. They put you directly into the hoosecow, basically. And so what we've been working on here for 3.5 years is an exercise to try to inform the public, and thanks to you, the listeners and viewers, for watching this show and absorbing what we do, to get you to understand why it's so important to do this, and then to try to get the various government authorities, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and all the above, to go out there and do your job. You know, go after these Clintons. No one's above the law. No one's too big to jail. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about this when you're ready. But, you know, you bring up the IRS. So, okay, so we've got it. That's the significance of...
Well, I wasn't quite done.
Oh, sorry.
So it's okay. So the deadline for the filing the information return is the 15th. And with that, you have to file an audit. You have to get a real bunch of licensed, certified professional accountants who give a shit, I'm sorry for cursing,
That's all right.
about, you know, following the rules of their profession and actually determining whether their client is a charity or
Such
is
as
not.
this group.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't they have a recent get together?
Yes, there was a little bit of a cookout at BKD. They were, it was going to be a pancake bake-off, but instead they found themselves cooking the books.
Yeah, with their client. So you have to get a serious bunch of accountants who take their professional responsibilities, you know, to heart, and that group has to, if they're going to actually lend their name to a set of books, it would be useful for them to make sure that that name can be used in, let's say, Arkansas, where it wasn't able to be used, BKD LLP, though they did issue financial statements in their name prior to the date when that name was registered in Arkansas. I mean, there's a whole pattern of brazenness and sloppiness, indeed, I think, criminality.
By BKD.
By BKD. And in order now for this, whatever this accounting firm, you know, if it's probably, I hope it's not the accounting firm of Mutt and Jeff, but whatever accounting firm has gotten its gumption together to try to issue an audit that will come out, it's got to come out by tomorrow. There's enough information in the public domain and enough concern in the public domain. There are investigations opened by the FBI, Department of Justice, foreign governments, state governments, that an accounting firm, you know, that cares about its reputation would want to think long and hard about relying upon the disgraceful work product of BKD to issue an audit. And if you're not going to rely on that work product, how then can you issue an audit? You have to go all the way back to when that tiger was a mere tiny little tiger.
Just a cub.
In October 23rd, 1997. So this is a big thing. You have to produce, the Clintons can't just file the tax information return without an audit. If they don't have an independent audit, then their filing is not complete. They're not organized lawfully. And once again, the Department of Justice can say, all right, you're done. You are absolutely done.
Is it the DOJ or the IRS that would say that?
Well, so what happens is the IRS does an investigation, but then it's up to the Department of Justice to determine what frauds to prosecute. So guess who had that role at the Department of Justice the first time the Clinton Foundation frauds escalated from 2001 to 2005?
I don't have the hot dog image ready, but I think I'm onto something.
You are onto something. Rat Rodenstein. I mean, he was the rat working for Lois Lerner, the rat underneath the hat. You know, with all the obvious criminal behavior from 2001 to 2005, you had James Comey, Dopey James Comey in the mix. He was reporting to Bob Mueller, who was head of the FBI. Sorry, Bob Mueller was reporting to Comey, actually.
Wow.
From 2003 onwards. And this team of the rat, Rodenstein, and Comey, and Mueller just, you know, evidently decided to shirk their basic duties and say, you know, well, this is an obvious fraud. The Clintons are doing it. We'll just let them do it. Why not? You know, what the hell?
A lot of cooking imagery today.
There you go. There you go. and so the point of all this is that they were able to get away, I would argue, with this behavior for more than a decade, because the Clintons were very careful and devious in inserting their acolytes into the halls of government. And they were also very devious and clever getting the Bush family, H.W. Bush and later George W. Bush, complicit in these frauds, or at least in a place with the Bush-Clinton-Katrina, with the Tsunami Fund, and then with the Clinton-Haiti Fund.
But are we sure it's the Clintons who got the Bushes involved and it wasn't just some kind of mutually agreed upon situation?
I mean, a lot of things have been said about my distant cousins that are not flattering, but I don't think they're that dumb. I honestly think that the Clintons have a lot more to lose here.
GW is that dumb.
Well, I don't think he's dumb enough to say, the Clintons have a fraud that's $3 billion. Our connection to it might be at 50 to 100 million. Let's jump in and take 50% of their liability. I mean, I don't think they'd be that stupid. And also in the filings for the ones that exist, the only two that I've found so far are the Clinton-Bush-Haiti and the Bush-Clinton-Katrina. There's nothing that I see for an independent tsunami entity or a Gulf Coast Recovery Fund, which are other funds mentioned involving the Bushes and the Clintons. Those filings and the legal paperwork associated with them are much more careful. I mean, they are careful, let's just put it that way. It doesn't take much to be more careful than the Clintons.
Right.
So anyway, they have to get this audit and they have to turn it in tomorrow. And so and until recently, we didn't have a Justice Department that was under the control of somebody who understood just how serious Clinton charity fraud is, but we've got this fellow, Matthew Whitaker, who's the acting Attorney General, the circus clowns who pretend that they work in the media and have been saying that the president doesn't have the constitutional authority to make this person be an acting Attorney General.
How do they get that idea?
There's two statutes apparently, and again, I'm not a lawyer. Under one statute, it would seem to give the president authority. On another statute, there's a question.
But doesn't the president always appoint the Attorney General?
Yeah, absolutely. The question is whether that person can serve as an acting Attorney General is the question now. And so I actually side with what I read makes the most sense, that you absolutely can do this under the Vacancies Act. But there are people passing themselves off as informed lawyers saying that no, actually the president can't do this. And I don't know the truth. We'll find out the truth. But the one thing I do know is that this Matthew Whitaker does understand charity law and does understand, and has frankly flat out stated categorically as a private citizen, that the Clinton Foundation is worthy of a second special prosecutor and is highly suspicious, operating it the way it was operated while Hillary was Secretary of State, and indeed before that while she was Secretary, and after that when she was an aspiring president. So it's only now that we have Whitaker in, we've gotten rid of Ferris Bueller's uncle, or
Forrest Gump.
Well, either one actually.
Yeah.
We've gotten rid of both of them. And we also now, for the first time, for over a month, we've had a new head of the IRS, Charles Reddick. So we have a team in place for the first time that if it wanted to enforce the law, if it wanted to teach a message to people that no one is above these strict charity laws and regulations, even former presidents, and perhaps especially former presidents, this is the perfect opportunity to do it with a lot of evidence that's out in the public domain and much more to come.
Right. Well, this is what I wanted to talk about for a moment, is the whole role of the IRS, because of course previously, and we've spoken quite a bit about Lois Lerner, she's been in charge of the IRS for a really long time and seems to have been kind of plugging up the dike that would have otherwise, pardon the pun, would have otherwise taken out the Clintons. But it was really interesting, Charles, because just this past weekend I was at the Operation Classified event in Dallas, which was a really great event put on by John B. Wells, and I got to meet Sidney Powell, who is a thoroughly impressive individual. She is a really smart attorney.
I know her.
And of course, she's written the book License to Lie. She's got this website, Creeps on a Mission, which this makes the art department jealous, Charles. This is an excellent drawing of several of the creeps involved in this mission to destroy President Trump. And the thing that Sidney mentioned that was so interesting, and I love it when different people who I speak to tie together the various elements of what the others are saying, because that's sort of the essence of what I always wanted Crowdsource the Truth to do. But Sidney brought it to my attention that Steve Stockman, who is a person who you brought to my attention, he's in jail for 10 years. We've spoken about it in the context of the charity fraud or whatever it is that I think it was a campaign fraud.
And charity fraud.
And charity fraud that he's been sort of implicated for. But it's interesting to note that this implication, this conviction came it seems, and Sidney even said she felt it was a political prosecution because Stockman was going after Lois Lerner, trying to hold her accountable for what she was doing, or perhaps in this case not doing. So that's an interesting turn. And again, putting together the dots, connecting the dots like this, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, the mainstream media isn't reporting on this. That's obvious. But, it's like we're putting together pieces of a puzzle. They don't even give you the pieces. We're starting to see the picture that the puzzle makes.
Well, yeah, and there's another connection, it's not even in the slides, that a lot of entertainment work is done through charities. And remember, there was a big story in the New York Times that didn't get quite to the heart of the tax fraud matter with the Weinstein issue, that some of these Hollywood productions, the course of them is you start out with a play first, and you don't go direct to Broadway. What you do is you go to a remote place, and a lot of these remote theaters are actually charities. So the very smart people who get involved with money say, well, since it's a charity, why don't you shoot $100,000 to the charity, you get a deduction for that, and then we'll have this side letter over here that because you did that, you get a profits interest in the movie if it ever becomes a movie, and you can assign that profits interest to somebody else, and then it never gets connected. Wow. And that's highly illegal, but that's the way a lot of these supposed creative movie financings or creative entertainment financings are structured. So yeah, I mean, this Lois Lerner, this particular department, the tax-exempt department of the IRS, is a department that actually holds enormous power because there's, I think, $5 trillion in U.S. charities. It's a lot of money in charities. And you make a mistake, you get on the wrong side of Lois Lerner's replacement, now under the Trump administration, and as happened under Lois Lerner, they can torture and persecute charities if they want to, and if nobody's going to stop them from doing that, because I think it was in the interest, frankly, of the Obama administration to do just that. There was a perceived money advantage of the conservatives and the right wing, and so I believe that McCain himself was involved goading Lois Lerner, or at least not standing in the way of Lois Lerner and Barack Obama's people, from doing what they did starting in 2009, 2010, which is to say we've got a midterm election up, we've got to choke off this money going to conservative candidates. One way to do that is to ride them extremely hard, and then another way is to not police the outrageous, burgeoning frauds at places like the Clinton Foundation and elsewhere. So before we get much more into the presentation, I mean, hats off to this art department again. This was a great movie, Tombstone, great story, and I believe, isn't the plot something like a bunch of people go to Tombstone, Arizona, and they really don't want to get involved cleaning up a mess, but they end up cleaning up that mess rather decisively.
Well, in the process of creating this poster, as usual, you had suggested the movie, but I was not only unfamiliar with the movie, I'm sort of unfamiliar with the legend of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, so I looked that up briefly, and it seems there was some wrongdoing against the Earps, and they went to court and didn't receive justice, and then Doc Holliday was a dentist and a gambler, which was a respectable profession at the time. And so Doc Holliday somehow saved Wyatt Earp's life, and they formed the veritable posse, I guess it's an actual posse, and went and doled out justice on their own. So
here we have...
This is a presidential posse.
We've got posse comitatus. No, this is, this is Matthew Whitaker, Seb Gorka, who's out on the trail, probably dispensing justice as we speak, the president. And then somebody who's taken a lot of guff, Sean Hannity in particular, for the last speech the president did out there with Rush Limbaugh territory. I mean, I have to say, I think that Sean Hannity has done fantastic work, particularly in the last, I don't know, 4 to 8 years, and in supporting not so much Trump the man alone, but in supporting the notion that we need to bring this country back to respect the Constitution, that when you go way far out into the wilderness, is crossing lines and saying elections are about allowing whoever wins the election to do whatever the hell they want to do, forget the Constitution, That's a very dangerous set of precedents that I believe were set under the Obama administration and arguably under the George W. Bush administration as well. So we need to have some balance. I mean, the Constitution that exists in this country was put together at considerable sacrifice by our founders after the failed experiment with the Articles of Confederation. It is an enduring document. In many respects, it is a wonderful model, particularly now for nations around the world to think about using. And I have to say, I applaud Sean Hannity for, he said he left the Republican Party a long time ago. He's a conservative economically, open-minded socially, which is what I am. I'm conservative economically and open-minded socially. So this is a team that, I think has done a lot of good work already, some playing bigger contributions to date than others. But I hope the president understands that just looking, I'm not saying in terms of his fate, but just looking at the clock, we have a limited period here. No one can change the fact that on January 1st, on and after January 1st, 2019, a collection of
demon rats?
Well, a collection of incompetent, arrogant, not terribly smart people are going to be handed the keys. It's like you say, all right, I've got this Maserati over here, and you're blind, and you've never driven anything, and
can't drive standard shift.
You can't drive standard shift, and you can't afford the insurance, and you can't afford the penalties if you run somebody over. But nonetheless, I'd like to give you, this, and there's a case of them in the front seat, and I'd like to give you some reefer. And I'd like to suggest that you just, go drive this car. Why don't you start in Times Square, on New Year's Eve? I mean, that's what's going to happen.
It's a hell of a weekend, Charles.
Yeah, that's basically what's going to happen. We've got the subpoena cannon going, according to 85 different investigations already they're thinking about launching. And so the president and his team have a limited amount of time to get things done under their control. And I certainly hope that's what we're going to see soon. I hope we see decisive action after this Clinton Foundation once again exhibits a pattern of reckless disregard for the law and the applicable regulations. I hope that they're ready, willing, and able to pounce on whatever filing does or does not make it across the line tomorrow. And then in the days through Thanksgiving and through Hanukkah and through Christmas, that regulators and prosecutors and grand juries pounce on all that, on the donors who've been supporting this crooked charity, on the executives who've been playing along, and make this a big exhibit, and the donors who've donated to it, and use this as a bipartisan exercise to start re-regulating charities fairly across the political spectrum.
Well, maybe Matthew Whitaker will be pivotal in making that happen. Charles, I always enjoy when we do the show because, for instance, last night on More Pain, which is one of the shows that people get only on Patreon, I had Larry Klayman joining Michael and I, and both Larry and Michael were decidedly negative on the president's current position and just basically the lack of activity. I think everybody's really concerned that he's allowed the Mueller investigation to go on as long as it has. And they were feeling quite, negative is really all I could say. They both seem to feel that the president, it may be too late.
I don't know. I think nobody has more financially to lose from this going wrong than Donald Trump. And he has not in the past exhibited disregard for his own personal interest. He's very shrewd. And as our friend, we're going to talk about this later, but our friend Jerry Corsi is fond of pointing out, Donald Trump always wins just when it looks like he's going to lose. And so I think and hope that the many fine people who are advising Trump and his colleagues see the urgency. And as a guess, they can't obstruct the Mueller investigation. So they're probably, most likely, Giuliani's been talking about in negotiations with Mueller as to what questions they're going to answer, what they're not going to answer, and probably got that to a fever pitch.
But why isn't he just challenging the legal authenticity of the Mueller investigation.
I don't know, but it could be that his lawyers say you can't do that, but even challenging it counts as obstruction. I don't know, but the point is, if they've gotten it to a place where they can limit the range of questions to written answers, turn those in, and then on the strength of the questions being asked and the answers being given, make the case compelling that you've got nothing. Now we've given you a chance. You didn't prove anything. We've answered your questions. We've been forthcoming. We're not obstructing justice. We've played with this process. Terminate the process, and then once we terminate the process, we're going to go back and see if you had the legal authority to do it in the first place. And if you did not, then there will be
him.
Then exactly. Well, I think they should prosecute.
I think
all
so
these
too.
people.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that about Dr. Corsi, because I was thinking about that when he said that. Did he say that to you and I in a personal?
I think it was one of those
interviews we did.
One of those possibly. We could obviously check it.
Yeah.
Crowdsourcers can check it.
Yeah. But that was a good statement from the doctor, and obviously I'm very concerned about Dr. Corsi's well-being. He's been subpoenaed and answered questions, and now he's come out and said that he expects to be indicted. I mean, I really have tremendous respect for Dr. Corsi, but that particular statement didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, let's talk about that later on the show, if that's okay. But this is, this is a fine, one of your better artwork department productions here, and I don't know how we're doing on the screensaver project, but
I found the software to do it, and I need to because it's I want to make it for Mac and Windows. There's so much going on, and there are these persistent antagonists who like to try to put roadblocks to waste my time further. But I'm so focused on, in addition to the tremendous shows that you and I do, interviewing people like Sidney Powell and Kevin Shipp and Scott Bennett and Robin Gritz. We did a round table at the Operation Classified that people seem to really like. And again, I think bringing together people like that who otherwise might not necessarily take the initiative to do something like that, it really can move things forward in ways that we can't even possibly conceive of. So that was an interesting thing. Now, Charles, we should probably, you want to just go to the slides?
Sure.
Okay, let me make sure we're there. Okay.
So it's my view, and I think it's your view, Jason, as well, that President Trump will soon move decisively to reorganize the executive branch. He now has more than enough experience to know, trust this person, don't trust that person. I actually loved the fact that Melania, his wife, in the last 24, 36 hours, has issued an extraordinary call to remove somebody from the national security apparatus that she does not trust. And that is very unusual, actually, for a first. The First Lady technically does not have chain of command authority over anybody. So it's interesting.
Except for the president.
Even that, there were moments, if you'll recall, where in the Clinton presidency, where the Secret Service was brought in to get Hillary out of the picture because she was throwing lamps at him or whatever, they had to protect the interests of the president first. So I actually think that Melania Trump, first of all, she's very smart. She speaks 5 languages. She has a career on her own, successful career on her own. And she's stayed with Donald Trump for some time now. They know each other well. It's not like she married him not knowing about his past. I mean, she's the 3rd wife, and she's not stupid. And she has been dignified and on the sidelines and pursuing things that make sense. And now for her to say, no, wait a minute, I don't like what's going on here. I think to issue the call publicly, this person needs to go. And at the same time, rumors are that John Kelly will be gone as chief of staff, and there could be a wider house cleaning. This is a good time to do a house cleaning.
Who was it that Melania wanted to kick out?
We could Google and get to it. I don't remember the name. But so I think we are in now for a house cleaning moment. And people say, well, my God, there have been 38 people or 40 people who've come and gone. This is the executive branch. Forget, that the line level, the White House staff is gigantic. Yeah. And the turnover is actually pretty light. I don't know that they filled all the positions. I think they've tried to keep the White House staff lean by design. And I believe, if you think about the long sweep of Donald Trump's life, has it taken him more time than he'd hoped to, for example, redo the west side of New York City? Yeah, it took a long time. It was a tough job. I mean, think about all the people on the West Side that complain about everything. If you gave them a check in Manhattan, if you forget the West Side, if you gave every resident of Manhattan $10 million and said, you don't have to pay any taxes on that, the answer would be, why isn't it 100? It wouldn't be thank you so much. Give me 10, give me 100. And I don't need handouts. I don't need your charity. That's kind of the. So he's had a long life pursuing these big projects. He's now 71, I guess, or 71. So maybe 72.
Didn't he just turn 72?
Maybe he's 72. And, it's not like he's got a 100-year plan. I mean, he's got a limited number of years left to be. Is that? Yeah.
It's Mira Ricardel, who is the New York Times called her the hatchet woman for John Bolton. So that ain't good. But Melania doesn't like this lady, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Of course, John Bolton is somewhat controversial as well.
Yeah, I don't think he should be there either, but that's for another show, perhaps.
So we believe that this house cleaning now could come because until now, I mean, you had the rat overseeing the Mueller investigation, and you have him in there basically making sure the trains in the Justice Department don't run on time as Deputy Attorney General. Got to get him out of there. You've got Sessions out of there. You've got a new person in who from the outside of the IRS who has a distinguished career. And now there's low-hanging fruit. I mean, for the first time ever, the interest on the debt is approaching a point, and the federal government debt is approaching the point where it could soon exceed the total military spending in this country. And people are going to say, wow, that's all Trump's fault, ignoring the fact that Barack Obama doubled the federal debt in 8 years, putting on more debt in this country than all prior presidents combined. So this extra interest bill, you really have to put a lot of that on
That's what Obama could be taking credit for when he makes speeches where he's channeling Chris Rock.
Right. Thanks, Obama. Yeah. But, so we have, and I had a pleasure of going on, the show with Peter Lavelle, Crosstalk. And it was actually, I was really honored. I mean, they never tell you when they bring you on the show who else is going to be on the panel, but they introduced me first, and then there was Joe Concha, who's often on Fox, but he's a Hill guy. And then they had Roger Simon, he was a co-founder of PJ Media, and he's a screenwriter and older guy. And we had a long discussion about media insanity. And you really think about it, the mainstream media has forgotten what their real job is. Yeah. I mean, you have people like you and like me who are opinion people. I mean, at least I view myself as an opinion person. Perhaps you say you're a news person. But the bulk of all journalists are supposed to be news people. They're supposed to tell the public what are discern fact from fiction and lay out the news objectively, not from the standpoint of progressives or the standpoint of conservatives. What happened? Something that this person just has no clue what actually happened. And so the media has gone, I think, in part, given to the aftermath of Woodward and Bernstein and the celebrated way in which they're credited with taking down Nixon. Journalists have all become gotcha people. They want to get the people in power. They want to expose problems. And they've sort of lost sight of the fact of explaining what truly has happened since 1988, that this globalist stuff doesn't work. Instead of examining it and saying, why are we so enamored of globalism? And the answer could be that most of the big media operations are very happy to send their people all flying all over the world, doing projects all over the world, getting contributions. They
have different, offices around the world and different versions of their show around the world.
So it's fun.
Globalists themselves.
Right, they're all basically the academia people. They love globalism because they got
campuses all over the world.
Well, maybe actually less. They have a few more campuses, but they have with globalism instead of just focusing on Americans, they can
students from everywhere.
Get dictators around the world send their kids competing for spots and fraudsters from around the world. So
that sounds like another title of an episode. Fraudsters from around the world.
Fraudsters gone wild.
Yeah.
But so we're in a moment now, actually, where I hope one of the things that the Trump administration will do is they try to pay down the debt and lessen the yawning deficit, is to look at these tax-exempt institutions and say, wait a minute, why does a highly endowed, rich university today that promotes one viewpoint only? It's not like you can go to Berkeley and say, my favorite idol is Ann Coulter, and I want to write my PhD thesis about Ann Coulter's contribution to American political discourse. I mean, you get shot probably by fellow students if you try that. These universities, in my view, are so intolerant, and in the same way that it's dangerous to limit your food intake to just one thing, when you only embrace one opinion and one way of thinking, you're going to be left behind, because the process of advancing human understanding is a process of thinking through many differing points of view, filtering out the junk, and advancing from your present state of knowledge to a higher state of knowledge or a better state of knowledge. You're not going to do that if the approach to getting in and surviving in a Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, to pick three, is first step if you're a man, throw away your razor blades. You got to get the scruffy thing going. Next thing, throw out your father's clothes and the way you used to dress and start dressing these ridiculous outfits. And then forget about. You got to embrace the rages. You can't study. I've got to work on climate change and the impact of climate change. I got to make sure there's social justice around the world. Don't bother me with getting those papers in. Those grades are so judgmental. Why is an A better than a B? Why should it just be
it's unfair to stupid people.
Right, exactly. So you look at this insanity, and you look at a world where these professors today at these endowed institutions are making millions of dollars off of this, and students are leaving with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt, that incapable of getting a job anywhere. I was on the subway going up to the Peter Lavelle thing, and to make sure I got there on time. And I looked to my left, and sure enough, standing next to me is a scruffy, scruffy beard, Lenin glasses, just
John
really mad.
Or the Russian guy, John Lennon, or
no, Lenin, like the Lenin, the troublemaker Lenin, Russian Lenin, or was he Ukrainian? I forget. Soviet. And I'm sitting there looking at him, and sure enough, he's wearing a canvas. He's got a canvas bag, that he's got strapped over his arm. And
right.
I look on it. In Latin, it says it has an insignia in the bag, and it says "Liberty without work."
Ooh.
And then I'm over at an undisclosed location where I work during the day, and in central Manhattan, and this guy sits down across from me. And again, another scruffy, same Lenin glasses, and he puts his computer up like this, and it says, "Always anti-fascist." I can tell right away, here's a conspirator, let's check and make sure nothing's ticking underneath there. But these hotbeds, these of frankly economic insanity that have churned out now a generation of people who are disconnected from any rational understanding of what truly is going on in the wider global world. This ignorance is really dangerous, and it makes it possible for charlatans, for fraudsters, to go out and get crowds whipped up into a frenzy, as happens on both sides.
Charles, I don't mean to interject, but there was someone very interesting at the John B. Wells event, a young lady who is a Berkeley student, and she's got a YouTube channel called Ashton Birdie, and she basically challenges all these things that you're talking about, the ultra-liberalism on campus, and she fights back with really sensible commentary. I would have to say she's sort of like a female Paul Joseph Watson in the style that she makes her videos, but she questions everything from the removal of Apu from The Simpsons to, because
they did that?
They removed the character, apparently, according to Ashton, that he was, politically
it's a cartoon.
Incorrect. Well, not only that, she does a very good job of pointing out that every single character in The Simpsons is a stereotype, including Homer Simpson himself, who is, of course, the stereotype of the typical fat, lazy, sitting at home drinking beer, watching television, white American. So it really is unfortunate that this social justice movement, or whatever it is, has infiltrated and just corrupted everything.
I mean, if you want to go, you can have a private club, not a nonprofit corporation that is not tax exempt. If you want to have a club and dress up as a fluffy bear and read the Bible backwards and and eat Hillary Clinton's cooking recipes and drink a whole bunch of Chardonnay, be my guest. But as long as it's no harmful activity, that's fine. But to get the kind of tax exemption that these universities get in an environment where, if you think about it, the supply and demand for spots at Harvard and Yale is artificially
Inflated.
The demand is gigantic,
Yeah.
and the supply is limited. And they managed to game the system, I think, here and in other countries, so that if you want to do well at a Harvard or Yale, you don't, or a top university of any kind, you can't. What people used to joke about, and my ex-wife is the daughter of 2 Columbia professors. She knew growing up, because she grew up in an academic world, the first step in getting an A in a professor's course is to ask the professor, "What books have you written?" And
Really?
then to read those books and say, I've read that book, and I had this thought and that thought and whatever. And then, oh, you read my book. Better yet, you bought my book. That's great. That's the first step in getting ahead. So you don't do like, evidently Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't hear that when she went through, if she did go through college, because the first step in currying favor with the person who's likely to be Speaker of the House is not to go down and demonstrate in front of her office to say that the leadership doesn't understand that we've got to fight first on climate change. Everything else is unimportant. That's not the way you do things. And that's a kind of, you're socialized, in quotes, going through this process now, and you turn out these people like Chelsea Clinton and others who are just, completely clueless.
I had a conversation with somebody about climate change. I'm very concerned with the environment and the direct impact on our health of the climate, the water, or the food we eat, and all that. But what people seem to fail to understand is that, let's say the impending climate disaster is 100 years out, 200 years out, even if it's 20 years out. If the economy fails tomorrow, people will be shooting each other in the streets. So when you're dead, you're not going to care about the climate. There's a certain triage that has to go on.
Well, the other thing, I speak to my dad about stuff like this, who's a scientist, a nuclear physicist. The first step in understanding whether climate, as they would say in Williamsburg, whether climate change is a thing, is what's the period you're measuring? This is something that you should measure going way, way back, not just 1,000 years. You should be going back hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And there's even a paper that was out in the recent days saying, actually, before the Industrial Revolution, before there were humans, that the damage to the Earth's climate was monumental, because there were these forests obviously grew up everywhere, and lightning occurred, and things would burn out of control, and a lot of particles would go up. So sifting out who's responsible for what, to say this is climate change is a thing, that it's man-made, that there's something we can do about it. These are all interesting topics that deserve serious scrutiny, but you shouldn't be having, and this is, we're in the season now of giving, where they have this mischievous approach where they set it up so you're walking down 6th Avenue or 5th Avenue, and there's one person in front of you, and there's one person with the back. So they're going to get you coming and going. And they'll stop me and say, don't you care about climate change? And I said, I'm late. They keep walking. I mean,
It's one of those hot button words, climate change. I think my issue is more man-made pollution hurting us.
Right, but so climate change, and the next thing, my father immediately said, one thing I hope we'll explain is, why are the ice caps melting on Mars? Why is that happening?
Too many airplanes.
No, on Mars.
I'm kidding.
Right. So the point is, could it be that the sun, what's going on in the sun, over which to date no humans have been living on the sun, could it be that whatever may be changing in the sun, whether there are fewer sunspots now or more sunspots, whatever, has an impact, and that the sun is disproportionately, a part of the equation over which man certainly has no control.
Yeah.
And that this has now become an article of faith that climate change, it gets Gore a Nobel Prize and an Academy Award in his mansions in Santa Barbara and the private
planes. Didn't he have
planes.
to make a sequel to update that movie because so much of it was wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that'll be wrong too. So anyway, we were going to discuss this with Dr. Gorka. We'll have to reserve that for another time. Maybe we could jump into the next slide.
Sure.
Or not.
Sorry.
Okay, so I gather, Jason, you've had increases in your subscriber base now?
Yeah, I think that the YouTube channel is doing quite well. We have exceeded 70,000, and well, this of course is the playlist, Charles. People who want to keep up on everything that's happening either on Sunday with Charles or Charles Ortel is closing in can come to the playlist and go through every one of this will be the 119th video we've done. It's hard to, where did the time go, Charles? But yeah, as you point out, we are rocketing past 70,000. I think a lot of people really enjoyed the various interviews that were done at John B. Wells' Operation Classified. James and Joanne Moriarty shared a story about what they said. Hillary Clinton contacted South Africa, Qatar, etc., and threatened the leaders of those countries that if they didn't participate in her war in Libya, that there'd be consequences. So they talk about the destruction.
Now, how do they know about that?
Well, they were there on the ground in Libya for many, many years. They are a Texas couple. They're a married couple who have exclusive rights to a oil well reconditioning technology that was wildly popular in Libya. So they made millions and millions of dollars selling this technology through Libya and shared with me their story. They were there when the siege on Benghazi took place. They were on an Al-Qaeda kill list, and they managed to escape the country by paying their would-be killers more than they were being paid to kill them. So they were able to escape, and they're back in Texas now. But as recently as about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Robert Mueller's special counsel office sent a crew of FBI agents to their home to ask them what they knew about WikiLeaks. They had been in contact with Dr. Corsi. Dr. Corsi wrote several articles about their revelations in Libya. And they're not just making this up. They present photographs from their own cell phones. They talk about how Libya was the most prosperous country in Africa, nearly $16,000 per capita income, which greatly exceeded every other country in Africa, and free health care. Gaddafi was loved by the people of Libya, and it was a beautiful place by all accounts. Everything we've heard about it apparently a lie, and now it's a destroyed, failed state. But
and didn't Hillary say, we came, we saw, they died, or something like that?
She did. She laughed at the murder of Gaddafi and the destruction of a once prosperous country where women have been liberated since the 1970s and were able to go to college and be doctors and lawyers and whatever profession they might like. Women were able to drive, whereas Hillary's good friends in Saudi Arabia only made that possible in 2018.
Well, Hillary can't even drive.
Well, right. Well, you got to be able to see to drive. And I mean, she claims to be a champion of women, but obviously she's more interested in destroying countries that would defend the rights of women in a part of the world where that isn't often happening. So it's a shocking story that the Moriartys shared. That just went out on Crowdsource The Truth this morning, but of course was pre-recorded a few days ago at Operation Classified. And I do have to reiterate that John B. Wells and his staff were incredibly kind, extremely generous with their space. That was obviously a very expensive event to put on, and I don't think a lot of other news people, YouTube commentators, radio personalities, or whatever, I don't think too many would have given me space at their event to conduct interviews, so it was very generous of them.
They're good people. John has had me on his Caravan at Midnight show a number of times, actually. I forget going how far back. Very generous with his time. Gave me a couple 2 hours, maybe more.
Super nice guy. I can't
Very
say
nice.
enough good things about John B. Wells.
Good people.
Yes.
So,
oh, should we also talk about Twitter, Charles? Have you been being suppressed this week? We should make a segment called This Week in Suppression. And
actually, no, I'm up now to 32.7, which is slow but steady improvement.
Okay, there we go. Doing better than GE, Charles.
Yeah, exactly, and I don't want to rub it in, but Bitcoin as well.
Oh, what's going on with Bitcoin?
It's getting crushed.
I haven't looked at that.
Yeah. But, so we could just go back to the disclaimer for a sec, because I want to make sure you have so many new...
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that particularly the new subscribers understand that our approach is different than the average bear. I've had the opportunity in recent days to talk to an old school friend, high school friend, who is a senior person at the Washington Post, and a good guy actually, senior editor. And I explained what we were trying to do to him, your Crowdsource the Truth thing, and the metrics, and he was really blown away with the fact that on a format like this, 2 hours roughly per podcast, that we would get this many viewers and this many within 24 hours to something else. And that's because I think people look at the alternative. You can watch even now Fox, and I just don't like watching, could some rich person go to Fox and say, listen, why don't we make the 6 to 7 hour advertising free so that we don't have to listen to Dukalax followed by adult diapers, followed by Peloton, followed by this drug and that drug that could kill you or cause your left arm to fall off if you don't, could we just have, a full hour of distilled news and then 15, 20 minutes of opinion debating the news and not have it just be constantly interrupted, because it's getting to be at this point, if I wanted to watch MSNBC, God forbid, I could do that. I know what channel it is. I think it's 14. And I know how to get even if I can't use my remote, I know how to make the television go to the channel. I'm not going to go and watch the Clown News Network. So don't go up into that territory. I don't even know the number of that one. but I can watch MSNBC, and honestly, there are some MSNBC anchors. Ari Melber, from time to time, I don't mind what some of what he has to say.
That's the gauge now. I don't mind some of what he has to say. That's
well, with the New York Times, it used to be when I read the New York Times regularly 30 years ago.
A little Mylanta with it.
Not even. No. I wake up in the morning and I have my routine down. I could not read it the way most humans would read it, which is to read Section A and the editorial page, because I'd get so mad at reading the editorials. So I said, I'm going to dip my finger into it. So I'll read the business section first, because they can't really screw that up too badly. And then I determined, yes, they can. then I'll go and I'll read the special segment that used to be, the one I used to love is the science segment. So I'd read that one. Then I'll read the metropolitan section, and that was pretty good. And then I would, give myself the courage to read the main thing. Mm-hmm. And I just would try not to read the editorials and the op-ed pages until I got to the point I said, why am I putting myself through this frustration? Why am I paying them so I can torture myself? Simpler solution, not going to read that crap.
Well, joking aside though, Charles, what you bring up is, again, one of the very essences of Crowdsource the Truth. There was an article this morning in True Pundit saying that Fox News is showing their true colors by joining this legal fight to restore CNN's Jim Acosta and his White House press pass. I just don't see how any multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar news operation that is reliant on advertisers can possibly give people honest news that's in the best interest of the viewers. Obviously, their interest is in the people who support their effort, which is why I've made Crowdsource the Truth a viewer-supported thing where people can join patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and support the shows. Even if they're only watching on YouTube, we really can't rely on an advertiser model here because it always corrupts the integrity of what we're discussing.
Well, if you think about it, the way newspapers used to work, it was, first of all, it wasn't so easy to get news, right, way back when. And so people were willing to reach into their pocket and pay a dime or a quarter or whatever, which is a lot of money back in the 1850s or 1860s.
Cadillac was $5 grand.
Not in 1860.
Yeah, exactly.
There were no Cadillacs.
It's even more expensive.
But then it went to the model of, why don't we get subscribers, exactly like you're doing? Why don't we get regular subscribers so we don't worry about whether the Tuesday edition is going to sell more than the Wednesday edition and the Sunday edition, all that. And then somebody had the bright idea, well, why don't, in addition to that, why don't we let advertisers supplement our income by letting
access our subscribers?
Well, and those newspapers were 4, 8, 12 pages. They were 16 pages. They were not these gigantic things. And now, these geniuses who run the media enterprises are saying, because we're losing our subscribers, because nobody's buying the newspapers, in order to keep it objective, what we'll do is we'll cozy up to the few louts who are still, taking ads, and we don't want to offend GE, because they're paying for a lot of ad revenue. Don't want to do that. So this is a different approach that you and I are doing, and you with Crowdsource the Truth, We are trying to fill a need unmet by mainstream media. That you take the Acosta case. I don't know if for my kids when they were young, what I got them, and really was for me, is, I don't know if you ever saw that bass that was on a...
Bassomatic?
It wasn't...
Oh, no, the singing...
The singing bass.
Yeah.
I would rather listen to the singing bass ask Donald Trump a question than this idiot, Jim Acosta, preen around and say, of course the president is a danger to society. I, Jim Acosta, unelected, unsupervised, am now going to teach you, Donald Trump, how to run this country. I don't have any time for that.
Can't they just kick him out on the grounds of he was being rude? The president says next question, and if you refuse to comply, it's like he's not kicking out all of CNN. It's just that rude guy.
Well, or how about, if you're looking at this, and yes, I suppose I have a political prism. I hate both parties. But, you look at this two-year spectacle and you say to yourself, all right, let's think about this. On the one hand, we have Russia, and then, colluded in this investigation, in this election, and the theory is that they invested 200,000 or whatever the number is
in Facebook ads.
Facebook ads. That's on the one. That's the Mueller case. We better distract the entire world with that, and ignore the fact that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and this Mark Elias, who's now trying to steal the election in Florida as a lawyer, Perkins Coie, that team allowed somebody who was under FBI investigation for mishandling classified information, Hillary Clinton, to even run. B, allowed the Democratic Party to rig the primaries, to give superdelegates and give Hillary Clinton an immediate advantage. They're all going around talking about climate change. How many primaries did we have in the Democratic Party? And why did we have them? If it was a foregone conclusion that Hillary, why didn't we tell everybody, you know what? To fight climate change, we're just going to cancel the primaries and let Hillary run. And then
less cars running, less planes.
You don't have to leave your house, spend time with your kids. I don't have to campaign.
Just appoint Hillary president.
Forget the Scooby-Doo van. We'll do it. Forget elections for the rest of the time. We'll just make her president for life. I mean, the difference, the real scandal here is not only in what actually seems to have happened in the Democratic and Republican primaries of 2015 and 16, and then the attempt to rig the election in 16, and then the attempt to overthrow the election results. That's not even the real scandal. The real scandal is the difference in coverage between, Russia and the absence. And then you've got this guy, Acosta, why aren't you asking real questions?
He's not even asking questions. He's blurting out his agenda.
Right, and that's why people...
Accusations.
That's why I said on Crosstalk, and I got a few chuckles out of my fellow panel members and Peter Lavelle. I said, they asked me, why is nobody watching CNN? I said, because Ancient Aliens is a lot more popular program. I mean, I've watched that program. But, it's actually...
Well, it's more sensible as well.
It's actually more sensible, but it's you look at that program and at least it's amusing. One character is nuttier than the next. One theory is...
the scientist.
All the scientists, they all somebody said to them, look, to be a scientist focused on aliens, you can't dress like a human.
No haircuts.
The haircuts, like our hair going this way, mustaches going that way, and crazy jackets and funny accents and what. It's amusing. It's not serious. It's just like CNN, and that's why it gets more viewers than CNN.
It's just crazy how they're trying to create an incident with this Jim Acosta, and I don't know that he actually in the strictest sense, put his hands on or struck the woman who was trying to pull the microphone. An argument could be made she inserted her arm into where he was holding the thing, and there was a struggle between. It's not like he punched her or slapped her, but he did kind of knock her down, and he wouldn't shut up, was what it was. President Trump told him several times, next question, and it's like, you know what, if you're not going to follow the rules, you're out. Get some other CNN stooge in there.
Right. True, but just to continue on a difference between what we do and what CNN and even Fox and the better networks do.
We're not lying.
Well, A, and that, but B, beyond that, what we're trying to do is engage you, the viewership, in a process of considering what we have to say, considering the evidence that we provide links to, interacting with us. And many of you have done this. Many of you have helped trigger important aspects of the ongoing investigations that are now flourishing around the world, and we appreciate that enormously. So we provide you these links. I in particular provide opinions which are based on my analysis of publicly available information alone. We share that information with you. We encourage your contacts and questions, your constructive suggestions. We block people who are abusive, and there have been to date, very few of them.
Speak for yourself.
Well, right, very few, relative to the 70,600
True.
subscribers. And so without any further ado, let's jump into, we're going to cover Sebastian Gorka's slide quickly without him. Obviously, we're not interacting with him but at the moment, but nonetheless, if we hit that Politico story, give you some background on Sebastian, and his wife apparently is also involved in national security issues. This was a story that went up early in the administration, in the very heady days, first days, and Sebastian didn't last very long inside the Trump administration. I think he was out by August or thereabouts of 2017.
Why exactly did that occur?
Well, there was a fair amount of, Sebastian we're going to get into that a little bit. He'd written some books about defeating jihad, and he's got some very anti-establishment views of what really has been happening in the nationalist versus globalist arena. He made the fatal error of working for Steve Bannon at Breitbart, and of course you're not allowed to do that and be a human being that isn't a racist and a Nazi or whatever if you're in Washington, D.C. So, the notion that this fellow Sebastian Gorka was going to have the ear of the president, somebody born of
Hungary.
Well, he was born of Hungarian ancestry in the UK, I believe, or at least raised in the UK, and then he became a naturalized American citizen in 2012. He got into the academic sphere in, not the traditional way, and of course, all these people in academia. One of the things that's really funny about academia to me is how brutal they are to one another. It's not like it's a collegial thing where if you say you're
college is not collegiate.
Exactly.
It's weird.
It's weird. It is. You go and you say, well, I have this view which doesn't comport with orthodoxy here, and you must be a racist, you must be a conservative, or you don't know what's going on. And in the area of national security, it's not like we can say, all right, the deans of the national security establishment, they've served us so well. We've had World War I, followed by World War II, followed by the Korean War, followed by the Vietnam War, followed by now, I'm leaving out wars.
17-year-long war in the Middle East.
Yeah, and it's not like we can say, whatever you guys and ladies thought was the right thing to do, that worked.
Yeah.
You can't say that. And this should be a time of great introspection where views from the outside, as I think come from Donald Trump and Gorka and others, we don't need to be lectured to by the very, very people who have seemed to create a perpetual state of instability around the world.
Right.
And so...
John Bolton.
Like John Bolton. So Gorka's, talks about, I think, in his book, making, in fact, the virtues of civilization great again. It's one thing to revere the idea of being out there in the wilderness with no people around you, and that's when a big-ass bear comes in and fucking chomps on your neck. I'll take that steak, and for dessert, I'll take you. So there are virtues of civilization. There are things to learn about civilization. There are different traditions and different nationalities and different histories that all need to be respected. And one of the things that has always made America great is this coming together. You leave behind your national ancestry, you come into this country, and you bring the contributions and
melting pot.
The mistakes. You learn from the mistakes that others have made. You inform one another, and we all move together. And that's allowed this country, for all its faults, to become by far the richest and most prosperous and vibrant, powerful economy on earth in a short period of time from a standing start. So one of the quotes, I'm not certain that he had put this in his book, but he references this Sun Tzu, who some say was a mythical Chinese general. And if we could just, we want to go back. This is the book, The Art of War. We have the quote up here, and I'll read it because it's really a good one. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear for the result of 100 battles, right? So you know who you are, you know who you're fighting. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat, so 50-50. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. That's Hillary Clinton. She doesn't know the enemy, and she doesn't know herself. That's Barack Obama. He doesn't know the enemy, he doesn't know himself. That's John Kerry. He doesn't know himself or the enemy. And that's a statement attributed to this mythical person going back more than 2,000 years. And I think that's wise. I won't read this whole quote here, but from Thomas Jefferson, a student of Sun Tzu and others, a single zealot may commence persecutor. Does that remind you of anybody? A single zealot?
Yes.
Bob Mueller, a single zealot, Loretta Lynch, a single zealot, Eric Holder, a single zealot, Barack Obama, may commence persecutor, and better men be his victims. And here it talks, it can never be too often repeated that the time for fixing every essential right on a legal basis is while our rulers are honest and ourselves united. This was written in 1782. Very interesting stuff. He predicts that the people, from the conclusion of this war, 1782, we shall be going downhill. It will then be necessary to resort every moment to the people for support. It will not be necessary. They will be forgotten, therefore, and their rights will be disregarded. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
They will forget themselves, but in the sole faculty of making money, and will never think of uniting to effect a due respect for their rights. Does that sound familiar? This is 1782, this idiot Jefferson, who's not so much of an idiot. The shackles, therefore, which shall not be knocked off at the conclusion of this war, will remain on us long, will be made heavier and heavier, till our rights shall revive or expire in a convulsion. I mean, this is a man who is very, very smart. And that's what we've been in this country, I would argue.
A convulsion?
A convulsion, where we don't know how it's going to turn out yet. We could be moving towards intolerant orthodoxy on the left. You know, Nancy Pelosi is destined to come back nuttier than a fruitcake again, you know, and say, you know, pass this bill. We got to pass the bill. Then we'll find out what's in it. You know,
it's like
that's
a Cracker
sensible.
Jacks box.
I mean, that's sensible, right? So one of my personal favorites, and I've mentioned this, the Dictionary of National Biography about English characters, is like a 30-plus volume set. And ordinarily, if you're a king or you're an important person, you might get a quarter page. This guy Bacon, Sir Francis Bacon, Francis Bacon, he gets like 30 pages.
It's interesting.
Why?
Well, it's just the nickname that a moron who frequently antagonizes this show and myself has taken, and he's in league with some of the other morons.
Oh, well, Francis Bacon is a great...
The real Francis Bacon, of course, is where he derives the name from.
Right, but think about this as a very smart sentence. If we begin with certainties, we shall end in doubts. So, social justice warrior, climate change, whatever, that's the way to go. Can't, you know, begin with that. But if we begin with doubts and are patient in them, we shall end with certainties. In other words, exercise professional skepticism, BKD at your cookout of cooking the books. You know, exercise professional skepticism. Don't say that it's, okay, this idiot Andrew Kessel is the CFO, he's given me management accounts, President Clinton says they're right, that means I better not check them, because I don't want to show Bill Clinton to be wrong, he's the former president. You know, so that's a very wise person, Francis Bacon. And those are two not so wise people.
Yeah.
In the kitchen, cooking the books.
We're really developing some nice memes for BKD.
That's right.
Cooking the books.
So Dr. Gorka was going to talk to us about his two recent books, Why We Fight, Defeating America's Enemies with No Apologies, and also his book, Defeating Jihad, the Winnable War. I want to talk about the first book a little bit. You know, actually, I fault George Bush, W. Bush, with this theory that, you know, we're going to have a nice war. We're going to make sure that in this war, you know, there'll be a minimum of casualties for the other side, because nice wars are something that we can do. And, you know, when you get to the point, and I'd say this as somebody who never served in the military, but I have a lot of respect for the military, when you get to the point where you cannot resolve your differences, and it's such an important gap between what you want to do and what the other side wants to do, that you resort to war, you better fight the war to win it. You better make sure that the person you've been talking to is in fact an enemy. You know, you better make sure that you understand that you're not being played. It could be that you're
Yeah.
being goaded into a fight, right?
Right.
And especially in the Middle East, where we're
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's even almost more important to be sure that the person who is an ally is actually an ally.
right. And to think through, we got this thing over here, the U.S. military budget. It's over $700 billion. How big is the next country?
Oh, it's like 1/50th or something.
Well, I think it's more like 150 billion or something. But
China would probably be
right, and they have a lot more people, but we're spending, 710 billion or 712 billion, and we're spending in total 6 trillion on government. That's a lot of money to be spending both on the military and government. So if we're going to be determining that a nation is an enemy, the Constitution provided that would be a process where the House of Representatives, in theory closest to the people, would consider the issue. Is this nation an enemy or not? Is this a war that we should fight or not? If it is a war, let's give the resources to our military. Let's give direction to what constitutes winning and what constitutes losing. And let's wage war, as Gorka suggests in his book, with no apologies. We've gotten to a place where war is a requirement, and we're doing this to protect our people. We're doing this for this reason or that reason. We're going to get it done, and we're not going to take 17 years to get it done, to not get it done.
Yeah,
Which is what's happened.
exactly.
So his other book, for which he's got written a number of books, but the two I wanted to feature with him and discuss with him, Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War. Here, there's this issue of, jihad, there's one Arabic translation means it's just a struggle for peace. We're not talking about militant and ISIS kind of stuff. And he took a lot of flack from the people, particularly the allies of Barack Obama and the dreaded Brennan,
Yeah.
who I think, it's a miracle to me that guy is not in prison right now, given what we know he may have done. It's a miracle to me.
He's been tweeting a lot.
Right.
Joe Flynn, the brother of General Michael Flynn, in our interview the other day, revealed that he saw Brennan at a hotel in Ireland that he was staying at, and he saw him in the bar a couple times.
Drinking non-alcoholic beer.
I don't know, he said he was drinking alcohol, which I thought, kind of went against some of the statements that Brennan had converted to Wahhabi Islam, but then I then revised that possibility yet again when the Moriartys told me that all throughout Libya, Muslims would drink alcohol in private. So there was a little bit of a kind of a...
No, I went, I won't say who, I went to a dinner in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, with very powerful people in the kingdom, and I knew this to be the case. They'd say, look, you're totally safe inside this house. You can do whatever you want. You're protected.
Literally,
whatever.
You could chop up Jamal Khashoggi and nobody would say anything.
We're going to do that. That's going to be entertainment later on. No, there's none of that stuff. But when you get to the front of the line, you're going to greet your host, and then they're going to ask you a simple question. Do you want water or iced tea? And just when you put this, whatever, you get a gigantic glass of this, and just so that you don't spit it out all over the place. If you ask for water, you're getting vodka. If you ask for iced tea, you're getting whiskey. And literally, they served it in buckets.
Nothing else to drink but whiskey and
That's
vodka.
it. Yeah, nothing else.
Oh,
and
in the desert. Yeah.
And I was sitting on my left was the head of the Saudi Arabian Central Bank. On my right was the host, who should be, we'll leave nameless. And this host was not actually born in Saudi Arabia. He was a billionaire from work done in Saudi Arabia. And the host got after it, he said, mischievous, he said, do you want to see my zoo? And so we were all drinking water and whatever, walking around, monkeys and elephants and lions and all this stuff. We get back to the table, and this host is now really seriously shit-faced. And he turns to the head of the central bank, who was, a Saudi royal family member, and he starts, how much money, the host says, how much money did you waste? How many tens of billions did you waste, you idiot? This is a guy here asking the guy, I'm here, guy here asking the question, the host of this guy over here, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to make it out of this dinner alive. Because this guy, the central bank guy, was not drinking. But you're right. I mean, they do drink in the Middle
You
East.
should have ordered an Arnold Palmer.
That's right. Yeah,
But yes, so it remains up in the air as to whether Brennan is Wahhabi Muslim or not.
So I would say for Sebastian, and I hope that, I'm sure he's got far more important things to do that came up at the last minute. And I can imagine that there's some tough calls being made during this broadcast even, and after this broadcast the next several days by people that Donald Trump trusts, and Sebastian Gorka is one of those people.
Right, because there can't be too many of them.
There are not many of them, and we encourage our viewership to go out and take a look at these books. Why We Fight is just out. Defeating Jihad came out in 2016. They're both great reads, and with that, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what actually happened. We have the first conservative treehouse link there, which is worth pulling up from, I think, yesterday. And this gives you a view of what this last refuge people, I forget if this is Sundance or not, takes people through what they believe is going to happen with this Democrat. Now they're calling it a Marxist-controlled House of Representatives. And I think it's important to understand the Democratic Party, the old Democratic Party, was a spectrum. It included, economic conservatives. It included defense hawks. The new Democratic Party has shifted so far to the left, and is so far from being under responsible guidance.
It's like an old lady on the highway with the left turn signal on the whole time.
Right, driving at 185 miles an hour backwards. But anyway, it's unfair of you to shame the way Nancy Pelosi is driven, because I'm sure she's never driven anything recently.
Just look at this photo. It sickens me, Charles.
Right. Well, and it's interesting to me, and this I think is a picture from back when she first became Speaker. It's interesting to me that the Democrats have been able to be so aggressive, both, particularly after the election, the recent midterm election. To me, it looks like obvious that they're committing fraud in place after place. I'm very suspicious, for example, about the Montana race and other Senate races. I don't buy the argument that fraud is possible, voter tampering is limited to Georgia and Florida, whatever. But I commend to our viewership. Please read the Conservative Treehouse. It's very good. They have lots of excellent articles, and this is one that just if you want to lose sleep, read this article, because it gives you a preview of what is in store for us once the Democrats take control of the House.
Just the way they're laughing like that, as it's like fiddling while Rome burns. Yesterday you're talking about election fraud, and yesterday I had Laura Loomer on with Larry Nichols, and Laura was talking to us about how she has provided photographic and video evidence of these provisional ballot boxes that were found in the back of an Avis rent-a-car at Fort Lauderdale Airport, and Larry gave us quite a lot of insights into how such a thing could be utilized in election fraud, not voter fraud. It's important that it's election fraud. But the tampering seems rampant, Charles, to the extent that I've got basically zero confidence in the election process. It's highly manipulated. There's little doubt of that.
I agree. Well, let's go into the slide. I just realized we've been on since 3?
Yeah.
Well, I better move this along then. So we have this story about our friend Jerry Corsi. Sarah Carter has been kind enough to talk a little bit about it. I'm not really sure what's going on here with why Mueller would target Corsi and why Corsi would give the live stream that he gave, I guess, on Monday or Tuesday, where he indicated that he felt pretty certain he was going to be indicted.
I don't know what his benefit was in saying that before it happened, because maybe it won't happen.
Right. So, but he certainly is, it was Monday, he's certainly feeling the pain, and he's a personal friend, and I just hope he'll end up being okay. People do get indicted, doesn't mean they get convicted.
Well, I think we're seeing the pressure tactic kind of working. They put the doctor under pressure, and he goes and puts out a live stream like that. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get him caught up and make some kind of a legal mistake, perhaps.
Right.
But I don't see any benefit in that. It seems definitely like the type of thing a lawyer would tell you not to do.
So this Daily Caller story is worth pulling up. All of these are going to be worth pulling up, sad to say. But, this is the point of Chuck Ross, who we're in contact with, is a good guy, and Chuck, nice work, is making the point that a lawyer from Mueller's team went in to question Corsi, who previously, or questioned one of these people. Yeah, he questioned Corsi, had previously represented the Clinton Foundation. I mean, are you freaking kidding me?
Right, that's what I mean. This is why they subpoenaed Corsi and are dying to indict him, because he's been a thorn in their side for the longest time.
Yeah, but this is absurd, and this is this whole issue of the special counsel statute was supposed to be, as I understand it, the legislative intent was to create a scenario where the Justice Department has an irreconcilable conflict, to appoint somebody who doesn't have such a conflict to tackle a matter of crucial importance to this country. This is, a case like the Clinton Foundation. Instead of doing it properly, they set it up this way under Rosenstein and Mueller.
Right.
And I think we need to be taking a step back and saying, this could happen under a crooked Republican against a Democrat. This is not a precedent we want to let stand, I don't think, whether Republican or Democrat. And then we have the story you were alluding to, the LA Times, which there is definitely something in the water out there.
In LA?
In the editorial. Well, I was born out there long ago.
I like LA.
I like LA,
but I
too.
don't like the LA Times.
I like LA, that's why I left. But, no, I do like it, actually, but I had no choice in leaving. Anyway, this is the storyline, that he's, stung by the midterm losses, fearful of Mueller, and now he's just going to, step back, much as Barack Obama had argued he did, that he basically never really was the president. It was Valerie Jarrett was doing everything. He was just golfing and skeet shooting and going.
He admitted that?
No. But that's what his critics were saying. He's just out there indulging in his favorite pastime, skeet shooting and
sneaking a cigarette
golf,
around.
And that. But this is the storyline they're trying to sell on Trump, that he's, this guy who's like not a type A personality, not somebody who doesn't sleep, not somebody who tweets incessantly, not somebody who travels around the world constantly, that he's actually said, you know what, I lost. I'm just going to spend the last 2 years,
Well, they have this kind of melancholy photo of him on a rainy day, walking alone. It subtly implies that he's isolated. He has to carry his own umbrella. This is juxtaposed against this article, a portrait of a losing Trump.
Right.
But I'm telling you, the whole reason they're after Dr. Corsi is because they don't want conservative journalists coming out with the truth. And if they take out Corsi and they take out Alex Jones and they take out Roger Stone, certainly people like me, Laura Loomer, et cetera, they would think will fall by the wayside, but we're just going to double down.
Triple down.
Triple down. Team Corsi, Charles. I'm with Dr. Corsi, and I certainly hope that he comes out of this all right.
So if we...
Sorry, something just happened here.
We don't need to pull this one up because we've talked about it before, but if people want to think about this, crucially and carefully, you can go to that link, the FBI vault file. You can see the number of dumps. What are we up to now? 27 different dumps of information.
A lot of dumps, Charles.
A lot of dumps. And a lot of information in there that clearly demonstrates there was an an active, robust FBI investigation into mishandling of classified information by Hillary Clinton and her associates. And decisions were made, likely with the connivance, perhaps even of Barack Obama himself, to give her a pass. I mean, here you're hounding Dr. Corsi, you're saying, give me everything. Dr. Corsi, according to press accounts, gave over his computers and his phones or whatever. And think about what Hillary did. Hillary...
Yeah, he should have bleach-bitted him and crushed him.
No, worse than that. Hillary said, first of all, I'm not going to tell you the truth about the Clinton Foundation. We're just going to withhold all that information from you. You'll never know how bad it is. Because, I've got the Band memo, I've got ultimately the Band memo, I've got the Kamiki Gibson memo, I've got all this stuff documenting that insiders at the Clinton Foundation knew it was a disaster. We're not going to tell you anything about that, Mr. President-elect and the Senate. We're going to lie to our fellow senators because we're both in the Senate now. We got to get this across the line. And then to make sure that nobody finds out how pervasive the corruption and fraud is, we're just going to conduct State Department business over private servers under our control using private unsecured devices also under our control. And we're going to do this the entire time I'm the Secretary of State. And then I'm going to walk off the job with all that information and all these potentially incriminating documents and transmissions. And I'm going to keep them for over a year, maybe a year and a half almost, more than a year and a half. And then when I get a congressional subpoena saying I need all that information back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bleach bit the stuff that I really don't want you to see. Yeah. And then I'm going to, with my team, we're going to study what we may want to give you, and then a portion of that we're going to hold back on spurious grounds that it's personal, and the residual we're going to give to you. And there's going to be no government supervision. It's not like, the FBI in that time frame, when in the beginning, actually when Hillary left, Mueller was still head of the FBI.
Right.
He was head till September 4th, 2013. So in this period, and for a long time, he could have said, now wait a minute, I know, our people know that people are using private email accounts because we screen this kind of stuff. And
who could have said that, you're saying?
Mueller should have known,
right.
And that's one of the reasons he's the last person who could be the special counsel. He's grossly incompetent here. Somebody should have said, like in the first instant, I'm told by people who served in government that if you want to send something that's classified, you've got to use government equipment. They don't want the possibility that you by going outside the government system, they'll lose track of what people in the government are saying at the high level. You just don't want to lose. Yet Hillary's doing this right and left, and nobody from the FBI, nobody from the NSA, nobody in the president's office, nobody in the CIA, had an inkling that anything like this was happening.
I don't believe that. I mean, despite disagreeing with much of what he said, John Kiriakou mentioned that John Kerry was using an AOL email account asking Kiriakou certain questions, and Kiriakou said, I'm not going to respond to that question on an AOL account. Sending to an unsecured email account is potentially criminal activity. And it caused me to speculate if John Kerry might be trying to entrap Kiriakou in doing something that could later be used against him.
Yeah, and think how many people were using alias email accounts. I mean, John Kerry probably had an account on the French equivalent of AOL, the Vietnamese equivalent of AOL.
Well, right. Yeah, ketchup account.
So before we go to these next two links, arguments were tendered that Donald Trump wanted to release the information in the FISA warrant file that nobody's seen, but we couldn't do that. America couldn't do that for fear of offending the Brits, or for fear of offending the Israelis. And now we know, if we hit this first link here, Zero Hedge, that the May government could well fall. The rumored Brexit deal that was announced has already collapsed. People are saying, no, we're not doing it that way. That's not a true Brexit. There's stories following this one. This was a 10 a.m. update this morning. That's going from bad to worse. So Britain is not going to be in a position now where they can mount a strenuous objection to anything that Donald Trump may want to do. And by the way, we don't direct American foreign policy
based on England. Who
based
cares?
On England. I mean,
and they're the ones that were coming up with this fake dossier against him anyway. I'm surprised Donald Trump cares what offends other people. It doesn't make sense.
So enough of that. We like you guys. It's we're America's oldest and closest ally and all that stuff. But we got some issues here, and we want this is going out into the public. Get her done.
Right.
Similarly, in Israel, it's horrible what's going on there now with the Gaza. Where is it? This one here. There's Netanyahu is trying to craft a peace deal, and of course the hardliners in Israel saying that's not going to work, and so the government there is in chaos, and now there are rockets flying and a military response from Israel. So once again, you say, look, guys, take care of your local problems. If you were involved, this is going to embarrass you. Tough. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't have done it in the past. If it embarrasses you now in the present, sorry, we're moving on. We've got to drain the swamp in the United States of America. We're going to do that, even if it hurts UK and Israeli interests.
I certainly don't care about either of those.
Yeah. And this here's the.
Oh,
that's okay.
Wow, it's very sensitive today.
Yeah, this is, what date was this? September, it's the bottom a little, September 19th, 2018, Trump said that, declassify this stuff. I mean, today is November 14th.
Yeah, what is he waiting
What
for?
in the F is going on? Yeah, just get it done. Just say, I don't care. I will release it. He has the power, I believe, the president has the power to declassify everything.
Anything.
Just say, I'm going to declassify, I don't care. Declassifying everything. Oh, that'll impact foreign security and whatever. I don't think it will. I'm declassifying this. Just get it out there. It's obviously incredibly embarrassing to Rosenstein and others who are fighting against him. So get it out. I want to see what happened here, what truly happened. And I think Carter Page deserves to see what happened.
Yeah, they're using it to implicate him, so certainly he does. All this, this is exactly what the Constitution was written for, isn't it, Charles? To prevent people from using secret documents in hidden courts, from indicting you.
And then here we have this, this is from Hannity.com, on the point we talked in first about Acosta. The White House is basically saying, get over yourselves. There are plenty of other people at CNN who could ask questions in the White House briefing.
Yeah.
Get somebody better.
Right.
There are many other CNN people who are credentialed.
Yeah.
And, it's like you go into somebody's house and you decide, attacking them. Well, I don't think the walls in your house should be white. I don't think this. I don't like the food you're going to give me for free. I don't like your liquor. It's not top shelf. You don't have a right to behave like that.
Yeah. They should have thrown him out.
Yeah. And then we have this is an interesting story that suddenly people are writing, what actually had a bunch of frozen money in Belgium that ostensibly belonged to Gaddafi and the Libyans has now disappeared. More disappearing money. It's funny how that happens.
Well, it's also interesting that we were just speaking with the Moriartys about Gaddafi.
Right.
I mean, it's terrible.
So, I think the world deserves an honest accounting of what truly did ultimately happen in Libya. So we'll end this on a somewhat lighter note. Here's the gift that keeps on giving. That somehow Monica Lewinsky has decided there's a new documentary out. First, she says that Bill Clinton should apologize to her. She's also said in the same documentary that she would like to go apologize
to
Hillary. And then in yet another story in the New York Post, she's saying she thought that whatever was on her dress was spinach dip.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and I'm like thinking to myself, okay, let me think that through. You keep a dress, rather than getting the spinach dip off your dress.
It's really good dip, Charles.
It was great. I want to be able to clone that dip, or like if I need to make more of the spinach dip, I want to be able to have enough on my beautiful cocktail dress.
Jeez.
So I think I won't send it to the dry cleaners. I mean, the story just doesn't hang together at all. But so long as Hillary pretends she's going to be, president, it's going to be out there.
I thought Monica was upset that she was the world's first internet meme, and she comes out with that spinach dip comment. That's definitely not good advice.
It's not good advice. So here's Steve Stockman. You talked about him. Let's hit this link here. And here's the Justice Department announcing on the 7th that Steve Stockman, for $1 million, he's going to pay $1 million in restitution, but for a relatively small charity fraud, he goes to prison.
What was the charity?
It's down in here somewhere. He's got to go to prison for 10 years.
And he's not well. He's diabetic. He's lost like 30 pounds in jail.
And he's 61 years old. I mean, so here you're going to go after this guy. Mail fraud, wiring fraud, conspiracy to make conduit contributions and false statements to the federal, making false statements, making excessive coordinated money laundering, filing a false tax return. These are all things one might guess have happened with the Clinton Foundation through multiple charities in much larger amounts. And here's made it using the name of a sham nonprofit entity, Life Without Limits. That sounds like a Clinton initiative. Yeah. Life without limits. Freedom without work.
Yeah, do what you want.
No ceilings.
Glass.
The full participation project. The Clinton Health Matters Initiative. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the Trump Justice Department is now incarcerating in a federal prison a former Republican Texas congressman. That's serious stuff. We've already talked at length about Corinne Brown, how she went to prison for 5 years. And just jumping quick, well, all right, we've had this up before. Here's a Democrat going to prison for 5 years for about the same size fraud. If you hit that next link, this one, for people who haven't already done so, if you want to understand, why I have been so adamant that this thing is a fraud, just read this 24-page document. And I hope federal prosecutors and state prosecutors and foreign prosecutors have read this thing. We're going to be updating this thing after November 15th, after tomorrow, when we see what they do or do not do. But I can tell you, I know a lot more about this foundation than I did on September 6, 2016. And the next edition is going to be
not good.
Brutal.
Yeah.
So here is a listing. We don't yet know the actual numbers. Again, sorry for the numbers, but what we do here to make it easy for people who don't like numbers, red is bad. I suppose that makes me a reddist.
Yeah.
Red is bad. The Articles of Incorporation of the Clinton Foundation from 2012 to the present have never lawfully been amended to give this foundation the power to do the many things they are doing illegally around the world. The bylaws were amended illegally on November 2nd, 2013 to concentrate control of the Clinton Foundation, the main foundation, into the hands of the Clintons. With that move, it rendered this whole thing not a public charity, therefore in gross violation of all sorts of laws and agreements and whatever. Nonetheless, the vaunted firm of BKD, we could put the pancake thing up there again, the BKD.
Is pancakes the new thing? We don't want Truman?
Yeah, I mean, the whatever you want, Truman, whichever you feel.
I have so many graphics over here.
There we go, the pancake team.
cookout.
They decided to cook the books for 2012 and 2013, and then Price Waterhouse decided to rely on the crooked work of BKD done from really 1999, the predecessor firm Baird Kurtz Dobson, right the way through to 2013, and BKD, Price Waterhouse relies on them for 14 work, relies on them for 15 work, and then Cohn Resnick relies on them for work done by Price Waterhouse and BKD. So the question is, this is a highly technical question, who is the dumb schmuck who's going to sign the audit? And we're going to find that out any day. Dumb Schmuck of the Year award. It's going to be, maybe they reach back into the history and they get BKD to do it again. Maybe they'll get some Nigerian accounting firm to do it, or
if you read in the news tomorrow that Truman the Tiger has been appointed to the board of directors of BKD, I think you know who they're going to pin it on.
And we don't know when this audit's going to be issued. But now we look at this, the law says you've got to get your audit in with the tax form. You got to get it in by the final filing deadline. Now the final filing deadline, you'll notice in 14 was November 16th, 2015, because in 14, I may have that wrong actually. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. In 15, November 15th fell on a Sunday, so they had to do it on Monday. You get that latitude. You certainly don't get the right to issue an audit on December 16th, 2014. That's well past the filing deadline, which means they didn't comply with the law in 2013, which means they didn't file a valid tax return in 2013. And when they amended their tax return, their organization informational return, in 15 concerning 12 and 13, they did not provide a new audit, which they should have done, to explain, have the changes be conformed. They didn't do that. So then we look at the trend, just the high-level trend, and I'll just make it simple for people. Bigger is better. Bigger revenues are better than smaller revenues.
Right.
When it comes to revenues. When it comes to costs, smaller is better. So the smaller the costs, the bigger the revenues. You're a happy camper, big revenues, small costs. Makes you happy. So we look at the trend while Hillary Clinton is Secretary of State and then a presidential candidate, the revenues go up, 234 and 295. People are saying, you know what, maybe get behind this horse. She might become president for 8 years. She knows how to
get behind this what?
Horse.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't say that. She could make our lives miserable if we don't support it, and alternatively, give her 20 million. That's chicken shit for us if we're, some oligarch or whatever. Give her 20 million, we'll get back a couple billion. So it's climbing, climbing, climbing. 15 is still 300 million. 16, these books are put together on the 15th of November 2017. Look at the revenues that were reported for 2017. Those are down a little bit. 38.4 million, down from 233.6.
Why is that so
Well,
dramatic?
let's just think. I mean, you lost horribly in the
no one's
election.
giving her any money anymore.
Yeah, there's no need to send any bribes
Everybody
to the Clinton
knows,
Foundation,
right.
right? Only probably the brother and sister of the dumb schmuck accounting firm are giving money to in 2017, and the costs, are still greater than the revenues. And look at the magic of that. In 2016, the loss was 16.8 million. In 2017, it's 16.1 million. That seems a little bit suspicious to me. I don't think these numbers are actually carefully considered. And I would note that in red here, that this is the annual result. So it's a $7.5 million akin to a profit, 72 million in 13, 88 million in 14, 34 million in 15, then a loss and a loss. And then the pile of assets, the so-called net assets, it climbs in 12, in 13, in 14, in 15. But what's really driving the climb is an illegal fundraising exercise to take the endowment, like universities have an endowment, now this Clinton Foundation has an endowment, from $250,000 up to $200 million.
Wow.
Okay. So
how'd they do that?
Well, they had our friend Dennis Cheng, beginning in 2000.
At London Economics School.
Yeah, he was down in the secret office at 77 Water with Eric Braverman, an undisclosed office, raising money like mad for this endowment. Now, you can't raise money for a general purpose endowment. You can raise money for an endowment that furthers the tax-exempt purposes of the Clinton Foundation. So the question is, what are the tax-exempt purposes of the Clinton Foundation, and what were they during the life of this fundraising exercise? So we're going to have an update next week based on what they actually do file. But it's curious to me, if we hit this link, Philanthropy News Digest reports on a story where somehow a local Arkansas newspaper gets somebody to walk into their offices and say, here's what happened here's our 990 tax form before it's filed, right? And we haven't seen the source document. We don't yet know why they would have gone to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette to give them this information. I contacted the reporter, and I've gotten, of course, nothing back from that reporter. But we will soon.
Is this fake news?
I don't know that it's fake news. It could be. I think what could be. I contacted Frank Lockwood. That it could well be that what they were doing here is trying to pressure the accounting firm into issuing an audit, because there's nothing about an audit in this. It just talks about the 990 tax form, and it could be that there's
the accounting firm is saying this is toxic, we can't go near it.
And the foundation is saying, well, we got to comply with the law. We've got to file our tax return, our information return. We hired you to do the audit. You've got to give us an audit, and we'll find out. It's idle speculation.
So it's blackmail, basically.
We'll see. We'll see what actually happens tomorrow. We should be able to see this audit one way or another. Either it happens or it doesn't happen.
Man, we should have some kind of Truman the Tiger event.
Exactly. Give prizes.
Yeah, gotta order the
It's
Truman.
great. This law says great. So if we go to the next page, so we know, those of us who've been following this closely, we know, again, red is bad and green is good, okay? Black is neutral. We know that the legally authorized purposes of the Clinton Foundation are to serve as a presidential archive and to have a place in Little Rock where scholars can go and study these papers.
And watch IMAX movies.
And watch IMAX movies and get a nice meal. But so what I did here is I put, these are numbers from the Clinton Foundation, in quotes, audit, that list out the spending by, in quotes, initiative. There is no such thing as an initiative. You can call it that, but you've got to have, you want to do something the way they were doing it, you've got to have corporations established around the world, you've got to control this stuff. But we add up, to make this simple, the total amount of unauthorized programs, 94% of total spending.
Wow.
Right? And only 6% was on the Clinton Presidential Center. It doesn't take, you take it first grader, maybe even a kindergartner, and you could say,
lying.
Lying. You look at this and you say, all right, are you telling me that you spent 94% of the money you spent on, in the case of the Clinton Health Access Initiative, it was unauthorized and the Clinton Foundation doesn't control it anymore. The Clinton Global Initiative was a gigantic gab fest that never wasn't really a charity and it's been wound up. This development initiative, they were never authorized for that. The Juice to Enterprise Partnership, they've never reported on that properly. The Clinton Climate Initiative is a joke. It has never had any legal standing to do anything. And the Clinton Health Matters Initiative, that's run by that clown that was on the Charity Navigator listed as the CEO. The guy leading this, it's 2% of the total. Charity Navigator is so smart that they say that dude is the CEO.
Wow.
Right.
But 2% of all that money is a pretty significant amount.
But nonetheless, you're not allowed, the bright line legal words are, you cannot have more than, quote, an insubstantial amount of your activities be pursuing other than these authorized tax-exempt purposes. 94% of what they did in 15 and 16, as it happens, was completely unauthorized.
So just to be clear, 94% counts as significant, right?
That might be significant. That's kind of significant.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
you come and you say, like, Charles, it's Jason here. I'm 94% certain that I'm completely wrong.
Yeah.
I don't say, well, that means you could be right.
Could be right.
Okay, I guess we're wrong. So I mean, this is not complicated. It's schmuck, if you're getting ready to sign the opinion, this is not complicated, right? So we go to the next page. And we've had long presentations about why the Clinton Foundation illegally changed the bylaws, why that's a big problem. And on November 2nd, 2013, the Clinton family engineered a change where they said, you know what, we're going to be in control of this foundation, all of its activities in between board meetings, of which we're probably not going to have many, and any of those activities are not subject to review by the board. And we're going to be in our position as Class A directors of this foundation for our natural lives. So that's basically like we're creating charity monarchy and anarchy. And then here's an excerpt, two excerpts from the recent audit, just describing this. First, the foundation. The Clinton Foundation's mission is to create partnerships of great purpose. Now that sounds good. That's snappy. I'm not going to create just an ordinary partnership. I'm going to create a partnership of great purpose. The only problem is charities are not allowed to be formed as partnerships. They can be corporations, associations, or trusts. So you start there and you say, it sounds good. Now, to improve global health and wellness, what does that mean? We're going to set up massage parlors around the world? I mean, you're not authorized for that. You're supposed to be staying there in Little Rock with your presidential records and your research facility. Increase opportunity for women and girls. Now, why is that necessarily?
Opportunities for what?
Yeah, exactly, for mayhem, for spinach dip.
Increase spinach dip opportunities around the world.
The fact that you're increasing opportunity for women and girls does not necessarily mean that's charitable.
Increasing opportunities to meet the governor.
Exactly, the president. Yeah. Reduce childhood obesity, a noble cause, but again, it may or may not be charitable. If you're actually saying you're doing that so you can hawk a whole bunch of, roadkill, sugar-enhanced food as nutritional when it's not, or to create economic opportunity and growth, that is not charity. And to help communities address the effects of climate change, if what you're really doing is you're selling Siemens and General Electric equipment to rural communities around the world with World Bank loans.
With no electricity.
With no electricity. That's not necessarily charitable. So the goal of this endowment is to provide a stable source of financial support to this mission. Well, this mission is not authorized. So on the surface, it's just a ridiculous. I mean, obviously the previous auditors decided, you know what we're going to do? To make sure we do a really bad job of this, we're going to make sure that our lawyers don't look at anything. You can't look at the international filings to the Clinton Foundation. You can't look at all these penalties we had to pay for, breaking the law in state after state. No. And anyway, so this talks a whole bunch of verbiage about what this endowment, the biggest piece of the puzzle here for the Clinton Foundation, what were the directors told, the outside directors told about the degree to which the Clinton family was going to break the law? They then induce all these directors in to be independent. You can't be an independent director or something controlled by the Clintons. So how much did these billionaires who are on the board know about this? How much do the various auditors know about this? And who in the hell is going to sign the management representation letter from the Clinton Foundation to the auditor? What idiot is going to go do that? Because I'll tell you, whoever signs that, you better count your last few moments of freedom, because you are headed not only to prison, you're going to lose all of your money, all of your reputation. Any idiot who would sign this letter deserves the fate that awaits that idiot. So if we go to the next page, and this is the final page. So how are these auditors, these mystery auditors, Schmuck, Schmuck, and Schmuck, how are they
It's
going
a new accounting firm.
Right, still, or the Schmuckles. How are they going to explain what happened in 2017? That on March 7th, 2017, supposedly the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation, this Clinton Health Access Initiative, decided, you know what, we don't want that anymore. We'll just give it away. And we'll take nothing back. We'll just give it to you. It was the biggest piece by far. We showed before the program service costs, gigantic. We just gave it away. And we're not going to explain that Bill Clinton still controls. He's, for the rest of his natural life, he's on the board of this new chai, so he has an influence. We're not going to explain any of that. Any of the money that Ira Magaziner may have made consulting for clients.
Having checks sent to his office there in
that
Massachusetts.
that kind of stuff. We're not going to disclose any of that. And then this last Clinton Global Initiative meeting, how is Schmuck and Schmuck going to deal with that? And the fact that, from 2005 until 2016, this circus, vaudeville circus of conferences where, grifters would get together behind closed doors and concoct spurious deals that enriched the Clintons and their allies, and then tapped into multinational sources of money, and none of this was disclosed properly. How is Schmuck and Schmuck going to deal with that? That, it never was a charity. The Clinton Health Access Initiative was never validly organized. How are they going to explain all that and audit that? And frauds, are back in focus now. It's frauds are in. And people care about frauds all of a sudden. So if we hit this thing, it happens, and obviously I did not plan it to happen this way, but it so happens that, the entity, the first complex multinational, and I would argue suspected fraud that I targeted was General Electric. And once again, right on cue, General Electric is back in the frame. And as bad as the shares going down is a problem for equity investors, what's a bigger problem is the fact that the credit default swaps, which would indicate the expense of, here we have, look at this chart here. Earlier in 2018, when I went to Florida to speak at a conference, the swaps were under 50 basis points.
What's a swap, Charles?
A credit default swap, think of it as an insurance contract. If you could go in and you could say that whether you own GE debt or not, you want to buy an instrument that will pay you off if GE defaults. So this is an instrument that lets you do that. You have to sign up for a fixed period of time, and you pay a premium, like an insurance premium, and then if GE defaults, you get a large payout.
So it's pretty risky, right?
Well, it depends. If you've done your work, it can be extremely fantastic. In this case, 50 basis point it was trading at. I don't know the exact scale of this graph, so within the last 2 months. And in the last several, whatever it is, weeks or months, the cost has gone from 50 to 208 basis points. And this is one of the most sophisticated markets on earth. And that means people are looking at this and saying, oh boy.
So the credit default swap value is going up?
The cost of buying insurance, insurance costs go up.
Because it's such a high risk that
the risk
going
is
to
increased.
default.
Yeah. This is how I identified GE as a problem back in 2007 and 8. Same story, same sorts of moves. And the difference is that there's not much left to sell within GE. They've sold off NBC, they've sold off a lot of GE capital. They are left with their liabilities and the question marks. And so I pointed this out. GE never, it was wise of them not to identify me by name, so they never criticized my work by name, but they also never defended their position.
Why was it wise to not name you?
Because if they had singled me out, that would have brought me to the same level as GE. Some analysts, there's let that guy cry in the wilderness. But, it would seem that the GE story is now merging with the Clinton Foundation story. And I just was on with Utrice Lee, the fantastic progressive radio network host, for an hour between 1 and 2, and making people aware of this. And I think this is a case of regulatory failure. This thing should have been dealt with a long time ago. We should not have allowed Barack Obama and Jeffrey Immelt to market, what happened with the so-called stimulus and then the quantitative easing as a big success. GE is a case study in failure. And it's really amazing to me how badly GE has fallen on its face. So we'll close, because I didn't realize that it was this long, and I'm making up for the fact that we didn't have a Sunday with Charles, giving people a little extra time.
Yeah.
We'll close with this. Not sure I want this endorsement department, okay? Nancy Pelosi is out there running for speaker again, and she gets this gift from Valerie Jarrett. I'm not sure I'd want Valerie Jarrett's endorsement right now if I were a Democrat. Not at all sure of that.
Nancy Pelosi has the blank, hysterical stare the Democrats need.
Exactly. Deer in the headlights. I mean, it's just... Is that the best person you can get?
Yeah, she really seems incompetent and nervous and always doing stupid things.
You can't use Taylor Swift. You can't use
She might be better.
No, it didn't work for Marsha Blackburn. You can't use Oprah Winfrey. That didn't work for Stacey Abrams. I suppose you can't really use Monica Lewinsky.
No, I mean, Taylor Swift might be a better Speaker of the House than Nancy Pelosi.
I think about a better person to write an endorsement.
Oh, no. The endorsement, no. Yeah.
So with that, I'm sorry to run over time, but...
No, it's not over time, Charles. This is the time that it takes. With regard to the GE and the financial fraud that you identified so many years ago and the similarities to, are the frauds that they're doing similar to the Clinton Foundation?
Yeah, in the sense that you're required, when you take money from the public, whether for profit in GE or for charity in the Clinton Foundation, you have to explain what you did with the money. You can't just go out and say, well, give me some money. You can do that on, what's that thing, GoFundMe. GoFundMe and stuff like that. Or you could, now it's gotten very embarrassing, frankly. You walk up 6th Avenue or down 5th Avenue, and every other block there are multiple beggars. You could have a beggar say that they're dying of cancer when they're not, or they need the money for food when they don't. But when you're, and there are desperate cases as well who do need support, but when it's for-profit or not-for-profit, the common thing here is that neither GE nor the Clinton Foundation have made truthful disclosures that explain exactly, to the best of their ability, what happened with each entity, and that don't shade the truth. You're not allowed in either case to say, we're fighting climate change, we're fighting this, HIV, we're doing this and that. It's kind of important to tell people that you're not authorized to do any of that. You're supposed to stay in Little Rock, but Little Rock, you don't like it anymore. Even in the top of the massage parlor in the penthouse next to the pool, don't like that, want to fight climate change, need some money, give it to me. Can't do that.
The thing that I found very interesting, though, on the show Reverse Engineered Crime Scene Investigations with David Hawkins, which is another one of the shows that's available to sponsors on Patreon, David frequently brings up this company called Serco, which used to be RCAGB, Great Britain, 1929. And in our last show, it came up that RCA was a spin-off of GE. So it just, I don't know, it feels like there's this giant collection of companies that are just cooking the books, spinning the numbers, making billions of dollars, and wreaking havoc throughout the world.
Well, and it's a problem because, in charity land and in corporate world, the overwhelming majority of people play by the rules.
Right.
And when you see a story like this, Jack Welch was lionized, some say fairly, I would say unfairly.
His lion eyes.
For taking a stock that was, when he, adjusted for splits and everything, was less than $1 a share, and when he left it was 40. And he made $400 billion, let's say, for his investors, and he only took a pittance, $1 billion of compensation for all that. Jeff Immelt, on the other hand, learned how to fall down the stairs the way Hillary did on September 11th, 2016 at an inopportune moment, and he went in, the stock was close to 40, and now look where it is. So if you're going to have this rule where numbers are important and reporting is important, you take this stuff seriously, you can't misreport. You can't fail to provide materials that are not audited properly by third parties. You can't select a board that's just insider cronies that's never going to step up to you. You can't game the compensation system so that no matter what happens, the executives make money. I really think it's particularly deplorable in the case of GE that Immelt, whose own father had been a line worker on the assembly line of some part of GE, and therefore would have cared about his pension. While Jeff was taking all this money for himself and his team, no one stood up and said, you know what, why don't we fund this pension wholly? Why don't we make sure that all of our workers why don't we make sure there's a reserve to pay our environmental liabilities? Why don't we make sure that, let's get rid of as many liabilities as possible lawfully, instead of doing these absurd acquisitions and reorganizations and having multiple corporate jets and strategy sessions and stupid-ass dinners. And
it seems like pensions are frequently being pillaged. What's up with pensions that people want to do fraud with pensions?
Well, what you do is you say, Jason, you're going to be with a company 10 years, 20 years, you're going to get a pension. You say, well, that's
30
great.
years later, you screw the guy.
No, you screw him before that. What you do is you say, you're going to have this pension, and then the correct amount of money to put in the pension fund each year is, let's say, $4,000. But you don't want to do that. You want to give yourself a $4,000 bonus times $100,000 employees. So you say, we'll get some accounting firm, BKD, just as an example.
They're a good one.
They're a good one. We'll get them to say that we actually did, in theory, put 4,000 in, but not really. And so you make these assumptions fraudulent assumptions about the rate of return on the pension assets, and you basically, and at the end of the day, you're scamming the public, you're scamming the employees, and all this is horrific just on its own, but it's even worse because it then gives grist to the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world, the Bernie Sanders of the world, and the Pocahontases of the world.
What's grist?
Ammunition, grist is stuff that goes inside a mill. Anyway, it gives you more ammunition to attack the law-abiding, profit-seeking, and charity-operating people. So this really is a tale that we can't brush it under the rug. We've got to expose it. The tale, yeah.
This is great. This was a simple one to do, but it's so
very well done. Very well done.
I'm just so happy to be cooking the books. Well, Charles, tomorrow will be the day. We'll see what happens. And so I think it's safe to assume that they will not correct all these problems and pull it out. So on next Wednesday's closing in, we should have quite a lot to discuss.
We're going to have to probably do a pile driver approach. We'll do, the quick summary on, maybe not 3 hours, but the quick summary on Wednesday, which is before Thanksgiving.
It's the day before Thanksgiving. People will have food for thought.
So we'll be thankful to the fools at Schmuck and Schmuck. And
well, Kevin was certain they were going to be employing Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
That's right. I know that one.
All right, Charles. Well, it's been another excellent day closing in. I do feel like we're getting close. Hopefully everything's going well for Dr. Corsi. I personally would have challenged the subpoena. I would have challenged the legality of Robert Mueller's entire investigation. But then again, when we rely on the courts to adhere to the law and do what's just, perhaps
stuff
could be
happens.
Disappointed. Yeah. Well, Charles, I also want to remind people that Crowdsource the Truth is viewer-supported, and if people enjoy the show, we really do need them to go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. Monthly sponsorship of just $2 per month is it's an inconsequential amount, less than one copy of the Lying Wall Street Journal and or the New York Times or any of these fake news publications. And people have an opportunity to interact with us, share information and evidence, and help drive these investigations. We've got many people, as you've pointed out in the comments, who are regular contributors, and it's a new way of bringing this information forward. So thank you once again, Charles.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. We've got another episode of The Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp, and that's only on Patreon, so we'll look forward to that.